Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Young Alumni Virtual Chat, Financial Literacy 101, brought to you by the UMass Amherst Alumni Association. My name is Nicole Young, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Young Alumni and Constituent Programs for the Alumni Association, and I will be hosting this evening's session. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. All participants will be muted throughout the presentation in order to reduce background noise. This virtual chat will be recorded, and the recording will be posted to the Alumni Association's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. By joining this session, you are giving your consent to such recordings. We have a limited amount of time, so we will save Q&A for the end. As the presentation is taking place, if you have questions, please use the chat function to send your questions privately to me, Nicole. I will compile your questions, and our panelists will answer at the end of the facilitated conversation. And without further ado, I'm very excited to begin tonight's moderated discussion by introducing our facilitators. Darren James graduated from American International College with a bachelor's in communication and general business. Darren has been with Northwestern Mutual since 2015 and currently serves as a financial advisor and college unit director, where he leads the charge on the firm's internship program. James Lowe is a graduate of Holyoke Community College and UMass Amherst's Eisenberg School of Management. James previously interned with River Valley Investors and worked as a programs assistant and startup consultant with Valley Venture Mentors before happily joining the Northwestern Mutual family as a financial representative in the fall of 2017. Thank you, Darren and James, for contributing your time to this evening to moderate this panel. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to the two of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thanks for having us, and thanks everyone for joining. So again, my name's Darren James. I don't know if it's on your screen, but this way you can at least see it. And I'm a financial advisor. James, my colleague and someone who works closely with me, also works in the financial planning space. So really excited. All right, everyone. So we wanna just really think about where we start this evening is around financial planning. And financial planning means so much to so many different people. But as we get started, really, what do you see for your future? We all have our own hopes and dreams for the future. When you think about yours, what do you see? Where are you going to live? What does your family life look like? How are you going to spend your free time? As a financial advisor, believe it or not, those are a lot of the things that we spend our time talking about with our clients, because no matter what our goals are, we are the ones that are responsible for taking the steps that we need to achieve them. So how are we going to make it happen? It's really through planning. And because the reality is that most of our goals need to be funded, what we're really talking about here is the financial side to all that planning. So we'll share with you guys, if you haven't received it already, the financial fitness worksheet. And it's going to ask you a series of questions. Now, you can feel free to do this after the session as well, just as you recap on this evening. But really, our focus is taking a look at some of those fundamental things around what you're already doing that you're good at, and where are some of the areas that we can improve. James and I are going to spend our time this evening talking about 5 key actions that, working with all of our clients, regardless of whether they're starting out their financial plan for the first time, fresh out of college, some of them, like one young professional I was working with today who's finishing up his senior semester but already has his career pegged out in Chicago, or if you're just redoing your financial plan for the first time. And these 5 key areas that we'll talk about are save, spend, grow, protect, and one of the real things that we feel is important, and we're getting from a lot of our clients more and more, especially in our generation, is giving and the philanthropic piece to what we do. So let's dive into each of these specific areas. And we're going to start off with saving, and I'm going to tee it up for James to get us started.
The biggest question most people have for us is, how much do you need to save? And if you have your checklist, we're going down the general rule of thumb is that you want to allocate about 20% of your income to savings and investing. But of course, you know, the amount that you save depends on your hopes for the future. So if you think about your goals, you write them down and be specific. unless you get down to a level of detail about your goals, you won't know if over time you're financially on track to meet them. So the biggest thing that we talk about is an emergency fund. And if we can just switch the slide here. Perfect. One more. Perfect. Another rhetorical question for you is, how many of you actually have an emergency fund? Regardless of what you may envision for yourself, your top savings priority should really be to establish an emergency fund. It's going to help you out a lot. Here's why an emergency fund is really critical. No matter how carefully you plan for your finances, there will always be unexpected expenses, like car repairs, a blown tire, vet bills, a trip to the ER, all the little things in life that happen. And yet surveys show that nearly half of Americans couldn't cover as much as an unexpected expense of $400 without using a credit card or borrowing money or really putting them in financial stress, which can cost you even more money in interest using a credit card to pay those bills. So another question I have for you, and again, it's rhetorical, is how many months of salary do you think that you need for an emergency fund? We recommend that you always keep about an equivalent of 6 months of living expenses and an account that's easily accessible, like a savings or a checking account. And it's okay to start small and add to it over time, but shoot for 6 months of expenses. Once you've got an emergency fund in place, then you can focus on your other priorities, like saving for a down payment on a house or a new car or vacation, and of course, saving for retirement, paying off debt, those types of things. So now we're going to talk about spending, and I'm going to turn it back over to Darren for that.
So really here, when we start talking about spending, we're talking about managing what you need and what you have to cover, what you owe, and of course, the magic of spending what you want. And so my mom always comes to mind when we think about that, and hearing her voice in my head, if you need it, get it. If you want it, forget it. So really taking a look at tracking expenses. So ask yourself, really, how well am I tracking my expenses and managing that piece of it? Think of it less as a budget and more of a spending plan. I know how much money I'm going to take in on a monthly basis, but what am I planning to spend each month? And is it in line and, in fact, below what I'm intending to bring in every single month? So spending wisely starts with that, getting a handle on what's coming in and on what's going out. The solution is pretty straightforward. Take an inventory of all the ways you're spending money. You can download an app to track your spending if you're technologically inclined, or save all your receipts for a period of 3 months. Take a look at your bank statement and go through the last normal month. Christmas is not a good time. Take a look at the last good month you've had and really assess things. And compare your spending to the rule that is in front of you guys, the 20-60-20 rule. So as we talked about before in our save section, 20% of your income should be set aside each month for saving and investing. The other 60% and 20% of the 20-60-20 rule is really in the spend portion of our checklist, right? No more than 60% of your income should be spent on essential expenses. So we're talking housing, transportation, food, children, and the family, your health care, and your insurances. Making sure that we include payments here around paying down debt, like car loans, student loans, and credit card balances. What we see from a lot of people we sit down with is people think of expenses that they know they're going to have every month, like gas for their car, but they think about that as a part of their discretionary expenses when you got to put gas in your car to get to work. So on average, what does it take for your car to get you through a normal week? And budget that as a part of your essential expenses. Then taking the remaining 20% of your income and spending it on the fun stuff. The nice things you like to have, like going out to eat, that new gadget that you've been really had your eye on, and the vacation that you've absolutely earned, even early on in your career. I worked for 7 straight years with no vacation. I'll show you guys my gray hair. Don't do it to yourself. So if your current spending plan doesn't line up with the 20-60-20 rule, you'll have some decisions to make about where you can adjust your spending, but realistically, just be conscious of it. And if it adheres to those guidelines, you'll be okay. The next thing we talk about once we've established that spending plan is growing your money. So to achieve your goals, you've got to save, and you've got to invest in ways that are going to allow your money to grow. So typically that means investing. Investing is particularly important when we're saving for the long term, like a down payment on a home, your children's education, and even early on, as early as the first job you get, saving for your own retirement. Even if you start small, the sooner you start saving for your future, the better. And as you probably know, that's because it allows you to take full advantage of compounding, which is earning interest on interest over time. It's absolutely amazing. And I'm sure you'll be amazed at how much of a difference compounding can make. If you decide to start investing $100 a month when you're age 45, right, as a hypothetical situation, let's assume that you get 6% annual return, including the compound interest. You can literally double your money by the time you turn 65. But if you start saving 10 years earlier, you can triple your money because you'll be earning interest on your interest. And my understanding is, our typical audience right now is between 22 and 27. So if you're starting now at about age 25, you can literally quadruple your money by age 65. Is it easier to do a little bit now and form a good habit, or have to take huge chunks of it down the road to try to catch up? So start saving as early as possible. We're all living longer. That's a factor that we have to contend with as advisors. The average plan that I'm running now runs my clients to age 100 to make sure that we don't run out of money. And women tend to live longer than men, which is great news, but it also means that you've got to cover the cost of 30 or more years in retirement. The biggest other factor is getting expert guidance. Our generation, more and more, we find people want that expert guidance. So getting a handle on your finances may seem like there's a lot to consider. But that's why I encourage you to work with a financial professional like James and myself, because we can really help you prioritize your goals and create a personalized plan that's unique to you. So when you earn a bonus, or you find yourself with an extra $100 a month, $200 a month, you can know with confidence that that money is allocated in the best way to support your goals. And don't mishear me here. It's not always about taking that extra money and saving it. One of the things that we talk about with our clients is following a rule of thirds, where you take a third of the extra money and go have some fun, go spend it, enjoy life. You take a third and you allocate it toward your short-term goals, building that emergency fund that we talked about, and then taking a third of it and putting it in your set it and forget it money, right? Retirement planning, your investable assets, and growing it over time. All that, though, has to get protected. So the next thing up on the list we'll talk about, and James will walk us through this, is protecting.
So protection is a really important piece of a financial plan, and some folks like to overlook it. But the way that I really see it is that you are your biggest asset, and so it's important for you to protect that. So getting a handle on your finances, may seem like there's like a lot to consider, and I encourage you to work with, I just reiterate what Darren said. Encourage you to work with a financial professional like myself or Darren, who can help you prioritize your goals. And just want to reiterate that. So going on from there, we want to talk about your paycheck and your loved ones. And I want you to think for a minute about what would happen to your ability to reach your goals if you became sick or injured or no longer able to work, or if you unexpectedly passed away, right? These are things that most young folks don't think about. I didn't think about it. No one wants to think about that, but it's a reality. And the truth is that it's my reality. Just share a personal story with you real quickly. It can and it does happen. It can happen to anyone. Most of you folks can't tell, but I'm severely hearing impaired. I wear hearing aids, and in order to work and live my life, I have to use numerous assistive technology and technology devices. And I'm using some to participate in this call. Before my work here at Northwestern Mutual, just before my junior year at Eisenberg, I took a job. I used to be a musician and an audio technician, and I couldn't get a road job. So I took a job doing landscaping and cell phone tower repair in the Midwest and lower Appalachian states. And I got a really common ear infection. And it's something that was very common to landscapers and people who work out in the woods. I happened to get it, and I happened to get it in both ears, just by touching one and then touching the other with the same hand, right? Or my earplugs, whatever. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the care that I needed right away. I didn't have the access to quality health care, unfortunately. And on my flight home, my eardrums ruptured. Then there was some time before I was able to get that taken care of as well. My injury left me 85% deaf in one ear and 90% deaf in the other. I'm lucky it's helped me, but I went 6 months before I could get financial help for hearing aids. I was injured and I needed to start my junior year at Eisenberg in 20 days. And I was without a job, I was without income, I couldn't function in class. I almost dropped out of college. And it was the most agonizing mental and financial stress I've ever gone through in my entire life. And I wish somebody had sat down and talked to me about protection. So I can't go back to playing music. I can't go back on the road or work at venues. I can't do that. I was lucky to find something else. But that was incredibly hard. So let's get into how you can protect yourself and alleviate some of that financial and mental stress. The majority of disabilities are simple. Most folks get sick. About 25% of us are going to experience it in our lifetime, whether that be pregnancy, heart attack, car accident. It can happen. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So some employers offer things called group disability coverage. So I want to ask if you folks understand what group disability is. And I also want to ask if you know that you have it. The way that group disability works is very different from the way that personal protection works. Most employers cover about 60% of your income. So that leaves you with 40% less money coming in if you got hurt or sick or couldn't work for any reason. You know, the things that I mentioned, something like pregnancy, which happens all the time. Would 60% of your income, whatever it is, be enough for you to live on? And the answer is probably not. I know for me that it wasn't. I didn't even have 60%, but I can tell you, even if I did have 60% of my income, I would still be on the verge of homelessness, which I was. By getting your own supplemental disability protection, your disability income insurance, you can cover more of your income that way that your employer does not. And it's one of the most affordable insurances that you can get, and it helps you cover one of your most important assets, which is yourself. Yourself is your biggest asset. You are your biggest asset. You buy disability insurance because you love yourself. Group disability also doesn't necessarily go on for your entire age. Most of your employer's insurance will stop after 2 years. Personal insurance will take it a lot longer than that over the course of your retirement, generally to retirement age. The second piece of protection that you have is protecting your loved ones in case something should happen to you. Something like life insurance. So you may have some life insurance through work. If you're lucky enough that they provide that benefit, a lot of employers don't. Is that enough if you have folks who depend on you, or even your final expenses, which everyone is going to have? Is what you have enough to take care of that? I can't tell you how many times I've seen folks put up GoFundMe pages for something for a friend. And it's not something that we want to think about. But again, the younger that you are, the easier it is to get it, and it's cheaper as well. So you want to think about what you want to have covered if you couldn't be there to financially support your loved ones. And if you decide to purchase life insurance beyond what might be offered through work, there are different types, different benefits to each type as well. Before I give it over to Darren, I'm just going to ask one more rhetorical question for you, is what causes matter to you? Darren's going to talk about giving, and I just want to let that sink in for a minute. I know what causes matter to me. Darren and I both do a lot of volunteer work and get out there and give back. So we want to know what's important to you. We want you to think about that. I'm going to turn it back over to Darren.
Awesome, James. Thanks. So give is the last section of what we're going to focus on as part of this conversation. And then we'll open up the floor to some discussion, as well as talk about some of the other things that Nicole's asked us to talk about, like credit and building that and the role that it plays in your financial life. When you have time or money to share, again, what are some of those causes that matter to you? To support those important causes, you got to make sure you have money available to give. So when you have your own financial life in order, it's easier to support others in need and support the things that you care about. So if you're going to want to financially support a cause that you believe in at some point in time, make that goal a part of your financial plan so you can save for it over time, so you can reap the benefits of being able to give both financially and in time to the organizations that matter to you, not just when it's a part of your legacy. Really taking that piece and making it an overall part of these action steps for financial planning. So there it is. Really, if we encapsulate it, the 5 key actions for creating a lifetime of financial security: save, spend, and having a spending plan that encompasses everything, growing your money, and how is the most effective way to do that, protecting it, which is by and large the number one thing that rocks people's financial security and their financial plan, whether they've come up with that plan on their own or they're working with a professional. The thing that affects them most is the lack of protection when things go awry. And then giving back now and in the future. We think it's important to keep in mind that these 5 considerations apply no matter how much money you have right now, what your goals are for the future, or where you are in life, because creating financial security is a lifelong process. The fundamentals of what we do, I share with all my clients, particularly my young clients, is let's establish the framework. Let's get into good habits. Because if we're doing all these key components, it's easier for you to step it up as you continue to grow in your career, as you continue to earn more money, as you continue to be more successful, but having the fundamentals in place. So the last thing is setting goals, which is important, especially at the beginning of every year. So in the follow-up documents you'll see a space for you to write 3 financial goals. A short-term goal you'd like to achieve 1 to 2 years from now, a medium-term goal for 3 to 10 years from now, and a long-term goal that's 11 plus years down the road. Take a minute and think of 5 of the strategies that we discussed and write down your priority goals. Take that, and James and I are going to be happy to follow up with anybody who'd like us to, just to continue this conversation on a more personal level, should you guys so decide to do that. We wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't hold anybody that's interested accountable for the goals. So we're, again, happy to follow up with you and continue the conversation and have you see working with a professional, doing it on your own, just being able to brainstorm with somebody and speak those things out loud, what impact that they're going to have. And, now we're going to, without further ado, James, unless I've missed anything, we want to open up the floor to any you guys have.
No, I think we're ready for questions.
That's perfect. So I actually have a couple of really, really good ones.
Awesome.
So the first question that I have that was posed from one of our participants is, what is the difference between a savings fund and an emergency fund?
Great question. Really, when you think about a savings, most people think about saving in our society now, and it's really deferred spending, right? I'm saving toward a specific purpose, like a down payment on a house. Well, we know after we get to that goal, that money's going to go into that cause. And so having a savings account for that purpose, again, think deferred spending, is the function of a savings account for most folks. Having an emergency fund is really about having money that we set aside that has no specific purpose and is there as financial buffer for when life happens. So think I'm in the middle of saving for my house and something happens with my family, and I grew up on St. Martin. My family's there. I now have to take an emergency trip that's going to cost me $1,000, to go there for a weekend to deal with things and get back. If I don't have an emergency fund, well, where is that money coming from? I'm either going to create debt by putting it on a credit card, or I'm going to have to take it away from my goal money and use it for that, which further delays my ability to get to that goal of owning a home or whatever the next big goal is in my life. So that's really the function of a savings account versus an emergency fund.
That's great. Thank you so much. The next question that I have is, and I actually have a lot, which this is awesome.
Great.
What to spend on professional guidance, like when it comes to hiring a financial planner?
It's another great question. So every financial planning professional is going to be different. For James and myself and a lot of our colleagues at Northwestern Mutual, what we really pride ourselves on is the fact that we're not fee-based advisors. So there's no cost for sitting down with us, for us doing the plan with you, for us brainstorming with you at all. The cost comes with when we present you with recommendations, what parts of the plan or how much of the plan you decide to take action on. I've worked with many young professionals who they'd rather go the fee-based route, and a fee-based plan, depending on the advisor, can cost you a couple $100 for them putting together a very basic financial plan where you have no obligation to move forward with them. They're just going to put together the plan. They're going to do a very comprehensive job, and then you have the option to execute the plan either with them for the additional cost of what their recommendations actually cost you, and versus going with the route like we do, where it's simply recommendation, or a financial plan that can cost $5,000 when it's very, very intricate. But that tends to be, from a cost perspective, something when you're more advanced in life and you've got multiple accounts and you're really looking at detailed strategy. So in terms of where it lands for you, like anything, consider your budget. If you think the fee-based route is an option for you and something that you would prefer, consider what you can afford and how complex your plan is. just like anything, shop the market. Perhaps it makes sense to sit with an advisor that doesn't cost you anything and see the intricacy of work that gets completed first, the most cost-effective route. And if you're not happy with it, consider the other route. And just bear in mind, you don't want to spend more than what you feel you're getting value for at the end of the day.
The next question that I have is, and I actually joined the participant who posed this question. So any webinars, books, websites, or other resources that are free that you would recommend to get started on self-financial planning?
Sure. Another great question. So I think,
yeah.
James, please go right ahead.
We actually have a really cool tool called NM Connect that has a lot of great financial information on folks who are just getting started. There's only so much that you can get from a website, and you can kind of pick and choose. So if you have questions or you really want to know the ins and the outs, we'd be happy to, sit down and talk with you and just have a conversation. That's my bet. Darren, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. One of the ways that I got started in this career was I was in a traditional, corporate job, and I was working 4 days a week, 40 hours in 4 days. And so on my 3-day weekends, I started poring over things like my 401k. So I went to the Fidelity website at the time and logged into my 401k, and there was just a slew of, frequently asked questions, FAQs, and I just started reading through them, and it just answers questions that are already being asked, right? Kind of the obvious things. But from a fundamental planning, personal planning standpoint to get yourself started, I think a couple of good books that are out there. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is a good one, just from a principled standpoint. It gives you principles to live by, but also practical applications to things. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was one that really changed the trajectory of my life. And, not just because I had lost my dad at an early age, and he embodied some of the less desirable things that you would teach your kids financially. But again, it gave you very practical things and things that you kind of go, hey, I was either exposed to that and didn't pay attention, or why doesn't everybody have access to this kind of information? Versus the, here's what I really lived, and that wasn't a great thing, and now I see how it can be done differently. So I think just starting out, those would kind of be the two fundamental things. But certainly, we've invested a lot of time and resources. We purchased a company called LearnVest a few years ago that took the fundamentals of financial questions that anybody would have for getting started, regardless of where they are in their financial life. And we've put that onto the Northwestern Mutual platform at northwesternmutual.com, just to give you a wealth of information around questions that you may have. And when you're ready, if you're ready, to be able to connect with a professional and have an easy conversation like we're having this evening around what makes sense and where it goes next.
And also, I would like to state too that Darren and James have forwarded some resources to me that I will be emailing out to everyone, along with the link to the recording afterwards, which they're worksheets and things like that to kind of get you started on some basic spending planning and things like that. The next question I have, and the questions keep coming, so everyone, thank you so much for getting the questions out. And if you
keep it brief.
and if you keep them coming, because we're going till 7:30 and it's 7:09 p.m. Eastern time. The next question that I have is, what is the difference? Because we have some people who have experience in working for commercial entities and educational organizations, and they hear terminologies like 401k and 403b.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a little bit of insight in terms of what those are and if there's any differences?
Sure. So at their core, employer retirement savings plans is what we're talking about. 401k versus 403b, those really refer specifically to the section of the IRS tax code that they're extracted from. So 401k is for private industry, 403b tends to be for nonprofits. In terms of their core functionality, they're not much different. What those are your employer has set up and decided where they're going to house your retirement assets and what company is going to be actively managing them. Every employer plan is different in terms of how you're vested in your plan, what your employer is contributing to your plan, and when you have access. Some employers, you immediately upon employment are able to contribute to your plan, and naturally all the money that you're putting into your plan is yours. Your employer then may, again, every employer is different, they may say, hey, Darren, if you put in 6% of your income and save that toward retirement, we will match you that same 6%, dollar for dollar, 50 cents on the dollar, up to that 6% limit. So that if you've got some skin in the game, we're going to help you achieve your financial goals. And that, at its core functionality, that's what it is. And that's where most people save the majority of their long-term retirement wealth. But it's one of the places where we always talk to folks about diversifying above and beyond that. But that, at its core, is an employer-sponsored retirement plan and how they work. The other important things to talk about there are just, as you're putting money into those buckets, understanding that the IRS tax code is currently written so you shouldn't be touching that money until you're 59 and a half or older, because that money goes in on a pre-tax basis. Make that make sense. If you're coming out of school and you're making $50,000 a year and you decide to put 10% of your income into that, so $5,000 for the year is going to get taken by your employer and put into that employer-sponsored plan. When you get your tax documents, you didn't make $50,000. You made $50,000 minus the $5,000 you put away into pre-tax retirement savings, and so you're only being taxed on $45,000, and the $5,000 you put into your employer-sponsored retirement plan is invested, and it's tax deferred until after age 59 and a half. If you put your money in there, but it's the only place that you've put your money, and at some point between now and 59 and a half, you need money for something, and you have to go there, there's a cautionary note here that the IRS code currently says, we're going to assess you the taxes for that money when you take it out. And when you go to file your taxes, we're going to also assess a 10% penalty. So 10%, I call it the stealing from your future self tax, but a 10% penalty on that money that's taxable and paid when you file your taxes. So those are the fundamentals of an employer-sponsored retirement plan, how they work, whether you're in the private industry or nonprofit space, a public sector, and some cautionary tales for it as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much. The next question that was posed, and I think I may have to connect the two of you or the three of you offline, because it seems like it's a very personal finance question, but I think it will help a lot of people, because there is this notion with millennials, especially coming out of school with a lot of large student loan debt, that saving is very hard.
Yes.
So if one has student loan debt and credit card debt, where do they start in terms of chiseling it off? And then how to save when you have to cover these types of very large expenses?
Yeah, it is a common obstacle right now with persons coming out of school. The first thing, honestly, is developing a spending plan, because more often than not, when James and I sit down with folks, we find that there's opportunity dollars, right? That's how I like to think about them. There's money that's being spent on things that, we could be using for saving that don't have a huge impact on your lifestyle. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you don't go out and buy any coffee. You never go out with your buddies just so you can pay those student loans and get them out of the way. But being cautious and conscious of where that money's going versus just going, okay, here's my income. I know that I got to pay these student loans. I got to pay my rent. I got to pay for my car. And then I'm just going to spend the rest of the money, whatever, and I'll save whatever's left. That's the very common thought process behind saving. I'll save whatever's left. With a spending plan, 20-60-20, we start allocating for, all right, I can't do 20% now. That's fine. Can we do 2? And then next year when you get a 3% raise, can we bump that number to 3 or 4? And then digging deep on some of the other concerns, like with credit cards, looking at things like your interest rate. Can you move your credit card debt to a place where you're not getting assessed interest for 12 months, 18 months? Is there a place, is there other relief that you can get for managing the credit card debt and making it more manageable? Taking a look at your student loans and thinking about restructuring debt. Is there an opportunity for you to consolidate or refinance some of that debt that you took out, just so you could get through school, but now you're older, you've got better income, and there's opportunity for you to really, again, consolidate that debt. Can you go on an income-based repayment plan? And that will really make a difference for a lot of folks. One young client that I'm working with, she's done that. She was a part of the changes to the Department of Labor law, where she no longer got overtime. And so she was steadily paying off her student loan debt, but then her income took a hit because they weren't paying her overtime anymore. And so she went on an income-based repayment plan and said, hey, I know I made X amount of dollars last year, but I'm making 20% less this year. And they scaled back her student loan payments and made it, again, still manageable. And fortunately, she's in an industry where the 10-year loan forgiveness program exists as well. But those are some quick concepts around what you can do differently toward managing that and still managing to save. Big message here, it's about the habit early on, because the amount will come as you grow.
Cool, thank you so much. We have a couple more questions left, and it's now like 7:17. So the next question, it's actually a two-part question about investing. So the first part of the question is, so this person, they started investing via a program called Robinhood, but want to get more involved seriously beyond that. So what would you recommend in terms of the next steps? And then the second part of the question is, how do you determine how risky an investment you should make when you're trying to grow your money?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing at this point, honestly, if you're thinking about getting more serious about investing, it's time to talk to a professional. Time to sit down with somebody and take stock of where your entire financial life is and get some professional recommendations around it. Now, at the end of that conversation, even with the professional, you may decide that, hey, it still makes sense for you to invest on your own, opening up a Vanguard account or some other online brokerage style account where you can invest your money and you can self-manage and look at it. But at least you come away from it with a more total picture of where you're headed. And then realistically, and if you want to just repeat the second question for me, I want to make sure I answer it accurately, Nicole.
Sure. The second part of the question is, how do you determine how risky an investment you should make when trying to grow your money?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of...
I'll take that. I'll take that one.
Awesome.
If that's okay.
Sorry, so, I talk a lot, James. I warned you.
You have to take a look at your finances, right? And you have to see how much you are physically able to put into the market. But what I would really suggest is risk assessment, right? Because it depends on you. I have a venture capital background, so I like a lot of risk. Some folks do not. It really depends on you. So that's kind of a question you're going to have to ask yourself, unless I'm missing something, Darren. Or I mean, if you sit down with us, we are happy to kind of go through that for you, or not for you, with you rather, and see really where your comfort level lies. We'd be happy to do that, Darren.
Yeah. So, what we walk all of our clients through in order to assess their tolerance for risk is what's called a risk tolerance questionnaire, right? So it really asks you a series of questions to determine how comfortable you are when we're talking about investing your money and what timelines specifically we're talking about. Now, those types of tools you can very easily find on any investment website. You can often find them as a part of your employer's sponsored retirement page, that they'll say, hey, take stock, make an assessment of your risk tolerance and make sure that you're properly and appropriately invested for your style. Some people, even as they think about 30, 40 years down the road, you'll hear advice like, oh, you should just be aggressive because you don't have to worry about it for 40 years. I work with a 30-year-old who's probably as conservative financially with his money as that of a typical 60-year-old person on the approach to retirement. No, doesn't matter. There's no judgment. That's how he's comfortable with his money being invested. There are things to understand when we take that risk, which is that he may not make as much money as somebody who invests differently, but it's about how you're comfortable. So, again, check your employer sponsored plan, go online and look for a risk tolerance profile for investing. And that would give you a good sense, and it'll give you normally a pie chart breakdown of what should my investments look like at the end of the day.
Thanks so much. So we have one more question.
Oh, good. Still making good time.
Oh yeah, we're making really good time. How do you suggest, and this I think is a problem for all of us, especially for many people who may be living paycheck to paycheck and a lot of it's accounted for bills. How do you suggest saving when most of your check is already accounted for?
The toughest question, and something we come across, and it's not our most favorite thing to talk about with our clients. It's time to get real. It's time to really sit down. Again, first place we go is to your spending plan. When you say all of my money is accounted for, how much of that accounted for are fixed expenses that you really have no control over? And how much of it are variable expenses that it's time to make some sacrifices? Perfect example, as a new business owner, my wife and I were charged with making some tough decisions in our own spending plan. Cable, internet, and phone. Those are luxuries that we enjoy. Do we need all three? Those were things that we were tasked with early on in our career and as business owners, and making those sacrifices, because that's a variable expense. It's discretionary. I have to pay for my car because I took a loan out on it. All right. I have to pay for the insurance because not only does the finance company require it, but I want to be protected when I'm in my vehicle, and I want to protect those around me in case I have a misstep. Those are things I can't avoid. But, going out with my friends every time they come down from Boston 2 times a month and, going out to the bar, is that money that I need to spend every weekend? No, I can buy a bottle of wine and enjoy that at home with them, and it's about the company. So the hard question there is, take a good look at that spending plan and determine what is completely out of your control and what is. Even with the things that you think you don't have any control over. Now, case in point, your auto insurance. Again, to use that as an example, a lot of people look at their auto insurance and they go, well, it cost me what it cost me. When was the last time you shopped your insurance out to other insurance providers? Not to lower your coverage and put yourself and your family at risk, But taking a look at if the coverage you have is good and you're comfortable with it, what are other insurance companies charging for the same amount of coverage? What's changed in your life that could be saving you money, even with your current, vehicle insurance provider? Did you go to a new employer where you get a discount just for working there? Can you do things like automatic payroll deductions with that insurance company because of your employer that saves you another 2, 3, 5% per year on your policy? Those are little ways where you can, and where we talk a lot with our clients about strategically reducing expenses that sometimes require no sacrifice and really just a phone call. 30 minutes, now I sound like a Geico commercial. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more. Are you really looking, or is that just noise in background, right? Those are interesting things that we do with all of our clients so that the accounted money can get accounted to someplace different that makes you feel better.
This is perfect. And actually, I want to insert the last question because I'm going through some major things in my life, and I'm thinking of purchasing my first home, which we're actually doing a workshop next week similar to this on preparing to purchase your first home.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, I don't know if you know this offhand, but first-time home buyers programs, are you able to offer like a quick, like 2 or 3 sentence, what is that? Because I've tried to do some internet research and I'm like, I can't really quite grasp what that is.
Yeah. Is that the whole question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. 2 or 3 sentences. So first-time homebuyer programs are designed to be educational for first-time homebuyers around making sure that you're not getting yourself into too much, too fast, too soon. And by committing your time and exercising the diligence around educating yourself and making a wise decision, you're often rewarded through some program, whether it's grant funded or it's through your city, town, or state, with down payment assistance or some kind of assistance toward getting a credit for purchasing your home for the first time in order to facilitate that process and get you into a situation where you're building equity in something you own versus renting, which is literally like taking money and throwing it out the window if you never ever own anything in your life.
That is perfect. Thank you so much. So we're actually going to wrap up tonight's conversation. I would like to take an opportunity to thank you all for joining us for tonight's chat, Financial Literacy 101. I would like to give a special thank you to Darren James and James Lowe for facilitating the conversation this evening. I want to give a prompt for next week's Young Alumni virtual chat, which is on purchasing your first home. It's scheduled Wednesday, January 25th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can register to attend that event, which is similar to this, via our website. Also, when I send out the information that Darren and James prepared for this, along with the video link, I will be sending out registration for that event as well. Your Alumni Association offers a range of programs, including career and professional development and ways to stay connected to the university beyond your time on campus. To learn more about our programs, please visit our website, which is umassalumni.com. On behalf of the UMass Amherst Alumni Association, we would like to thank Darren and James for making time to share their insight with us this evening. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you at other Alumni Association events in the future. Have a great evening and go UMass.